Hi guys, it's Michelle with Deception Bytes, and I'm back again to continue on with the QAnon posts. I have heard now that he is posting on 8chan as opposed to 4chan. I don't know if that is true or not, but after we finish these and go through all these, I am going to check those posts out and see what is up with that. See if I really think it's Q. People have confirmed that they believe that it is. But we'll look at that after we finish this. So I'm just picking up where we left off last time, November 6, 2017 at 4:51 p.m. And the Q asks, what is money flow disruption? Well, we all know what it means if money flow gets disrupted. I think we all know. And of course, he's talking about Saudi Arabia. And he's saying, list the billionaires. Well, we pretty much know who the billionaires are, and we've gone through this in previous posts because Q tends to ask the same questions over and over again for emphasis, and the more times he asks it, I believe that that's the more emphasis that he's placing on it. What family history goes back pre-World War I, II? Well, that would be the Bush family. Why is this relevant? Well, it's obviously relevant, or Q wouldn't be asking that. So it is relevant. We know that the Bushes have had their fingers in all sorts of nasty pies. So, Preston Bush was one of them that financed Hitler. So, their family has been involved in a lot. Why did the Bush family recently break silence and attack POTUS? Now, this was another question that was asked earlier in the post that we have answered before. It was right before the Saudi Arabia arrest, so I believe it was an attempt to tarnish his name. Because if you can tarnish his name, then people will not tend to pay so much attention to the things that he's saying or the things that he's doing. Is it a coincidence that it was pre-Saudi Arabia arrest? Well, of course not. And Q keeps telling us that there's no such thing as coincidence. So we have to go with him on this and say, no, it was not a coincidence. Who audits the billions paid for war? I'm not exactly sure who audits it, but they're not doing a good job because as we saw in the last video, billions of dollars are missing. They're not accounted for. So whoever's doing the auditing, they're not doing a good job. Who audits the billions paid for environmental policy? Actually, I don't know. I'm not sure who does. I did try to find that, but I didn't. Maybe somebody, has the answer to that, and that would be wonderful if you'd put it down below in the comments. Where do the funds go? Well, I don't know, but I think that Q is telling us because he says offshore, and I said, well, possibly. It would make sense to me if they were offshore because you wouldn't be stupid enough to keep it in an American bank. To who/which entity and or organization? Well, we already know that huge amounts have gone into the nonprofit organizations by senior officials in the U.S., like the Clinton Foundation, the McCain Institute, the Obama Foundation, the Bush Foundation. Millions and billions of dollars end up going into these nonprofit organizations. And of course, they're wonderful places to launder money. So offshore, yeah, I would say that it is offshore. What slush fund was recently terminated by AG Sessions? And of course, that's Attorney General Sessions. And that is this one. And my computer is slow, so. Okay. How Jeff Sessions is stopping the EPA's, and that's the Environmental Protection Agency's slush fund. Principles are to be found in many places, a blessing in the Beltway where principles are needed on a daily basis. One such principle is enshrined in the Appropriations Clause of the Constitution. No money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law. And here is another principle not found in the Constitution. Punish your enemies and reward your friends. One might think that the constitutional principle would dominate the political one, particularly by public officials sworn to support and defend the former. Alas, one would be wrong, a discouraging reality illustrated clearly by the practice of the Environmental Protection Agency over recent years in terms of using settlements of enforcement actions to subsidize its favored industrial groups. Consider, for example, a violation of environmental rules, both recent and egregious, the Volkswagen diesel emissions cheating scandal. The settlement of claims from that set of violations of the Clean Air Act will cost Volkswagen about $14.7 billion, of which about $1.5 billion is a civil penalty. Volkswagen is also required to spend $2 billion on charging stations and promotion of electric vehicles. Note that the Obama administration twice requested congressional funding for electric vehicle infrastructure, and twice Congress refused. Accordingly, the $2 billion from the Volkswagen settlement is an obvious end run around the congressional power of the purse, the appropriations clause of the Constitution used to reward the electric vehicle friends of the Obama administration generally and of the EPA bureaucracy in particular. Note that the $2.8 billion will go to California alone, and California and its vast environmental bureaucracy, is nothing if not a friend of the EPA enforcers. More generally, there is no constitutional power for executive branch agencies to use or direct payments agreed in enforcement settlements as a financing mechanism for industrial policy or any other activity in the absence of a congressional appropriation. Such payments in principle, there's that word again, are compensation for violations of law and regulations protecting the public. That's so the appropriate recipient of the funds is the U.S. Treasury rather than some firm, industry, or interest group that executive branch officials happen to view with favor. Accordingly, it matters not one whit whether the uses to which the settlement funds are directed, having been blessed by the angels, will create an environmental heaven on earth. The angels are not Congress, and Congress comprises few angels, but Congress and only Congress has the constitutional power to appropriate public resources among competing uses. The Volkswagen settlement is hardly the only such mitigation project slush fund created with EPA litigation agreements. William Yeatman of the Competitive Enterprise Institute notes that since 2005, the EPA and the Justice Department have reached 18 settlements under the Clean Air Act, directing over $74 million to renewable energy products, $257 million to energy efficient projects, and $1.2 billion, actually $2 billion, to the electric vehicle infrastructure. All except $7 million was negotiated during the Obama administration. Did Congress authorize any of it? Nope. Just excuse me for a minute while I take a drink. Okay. So I think that's, I don't need to continue reading all this. This might be interesting. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has noticed this blatant system of circumventing the congressional power of the purse and has signed a directive to the Justice Department to halt approvals of third-party payments in settlement agreements. In a July 28 memorandum, Sessions also directed the relevant Justice Department officials to compile a list of all such settlements and third-party payments going back a decade, raising the interesting and wholly appropriate possibility that outstanding payments might not be made, and perhaps even that the recipients of past payments might be required to refund them to the Treasury. Justice Department officials claim that Sessions' new policy would not apply to EPA supplemental projects. If that is correct, it would weaken the new policy substantially, but Sessions has asked the right question, and his new approach is a vast improvement, and that is a principle to be applauded, and I would agree with that. So let's go back here. What is Fast and Furious? Well, I think we know what Fast and Furious is, but let me head out to Wikipedia, which in this case I think gives a pretty good definition. Gun walking, or letting guns walk, was a tactic of the Arizona Field Office of the United States Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF, which ran a series of sting operations between 2006 and 2011 in the Tucson and Phoenix area, where the ATF purposely allowed licensed firearms dealers to sell weapons to illegal straw buyers, hoping to track the guns to Mexico drug cartel leaders and arrest them. These operations were done under the umbrella of Project Gunrunner, a project intended to stem the flow of firearms into Mexico by interdicting straw purchasers and gun traffickers within the United States. The Jacob Chambers case began in October 2009 and eventually became known in February 2010 as Operation Fast and Furious, after agents discovered Chambers and other suspects under investigation belonged to a car club. So that is what Fast and Furious is. I don't know all the ins and outs of it. I just know that the guns ended up in the wrong place. So, and if anybody else wants to comment on that, please leave comments below. What is the underlying theme? Weapons, money. And Q lets us know that we're on track with that because he puts money in big capital letters with a period. Money. That's the underlying theme, that he wants us to come to that conclusion. Who controls the Fed? Well, the Fed is privately owned, as I'm sure we all know, and shares are held by private banks. So it's not owned by the United States. It's it's privately owned. What did I miss up here? Oh, okay. We'll get to that. Just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything. So who controls the Fed? Well, it's privately owned and the shares are held by private banks. How did political leaders / talking heads accumulate assets in excess of $5 million? Well, that's a good question, isn't it? What was the net worth for each prior to taking office? Well, this is something that we've looked into, in earlier videos, so I'm not going to visit it again. We did find that people, before they took office, they weren't poor, but they were not wealthy either. But then suddenly, while they're in office, they're getting rich. They're becoming multimillionaires. Well, how is that? It doesn't reconcile with their compensation. So where are they getting this money? And I think we all know where they're getting the money. And Q says, why is this relevant? Well, because they're getting rich while they're in office. So how is that possible? Seeing, their salaries. I mean, it's just not possible. So I think that that's what he's getting at there. And then he closes with Snow White, Godfather 3, Q. Now, let's go up to the next one. Okay, November 6, 2017, 4:51 p.m. Now, Q is asking here, why, by coincidence, is there a terrorist attack or mental health sea-level attack within a short time post-negative Democratic news? And I put that as true because I've noticed that several times as well. If there's something negative that's going to come out and really affect the Democrats, then something else will happen to take the focus off of that. For example, this is November 6th when this is posted. I'm not sure if he's referring to the attack in Sutherland, Texas there, the church shooting. I'm not sure if he's, referring to that, but he may be. But that's not the only, case of that happening. It happens a lot. Do you believe in coincidences? No, I don't. I do think that there is such a thing as coincidence, but I think it's pretty rare. And I think in this situation, Q keeps telling us over and over again that there are no coincidences. So I think that we would do well to listen to that. They think you are stupid. puppets without power. They want your guns. Why? No power left. Well, yeah, we know that they want our guns. They've wanted our guns for a very long time because we're much easier. A country is much easier to defeat if the citizens are unarmed. You have no protection. And that's exactly what Hitler did before he came to power, where right after coming to power, he got the guns, and that's what they want. And, Q is saying that they want the guns because they're puppets now without power. So they want your guns because they have no power left. They need that power over you. Who funds ISIS? Well, again, we've had several videos now. I think it's obvious who funds ISIS. I think, basically the weapons that ISIS have come from the U.S. And we know the people involved in funding it. So I don't think I need to go into that again. What email published by Wiki-leaks connects Saudi Arabia, Qatar to ISIS? Well, let's go take a look. Okay. Is Saudi Arabia funding ISIS? Well, of course, we know that they are, or they have been in the past. Okay, the conversation about Islamic extremism should begin with Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states that had funded and fueled extremist ideology, Jeremy Corbyn has said. The accusation is common that the House of Saud is allowing a flow of money to finance ISIS, but the Saudi government has completely rejected the false allegations, dismissing them as malicious falsehood. We can't answer this one with absolute certainty since any financing is highly secretive. All we can do is weigh up the documents and research that are currently available. How strong is the evidence? Certainly the most powerful indication of Saudi's financial links with ISIS can be seen in the cache of emails leaked from the office of none other than Hillary Clinton, who was U.S. Secretary of State from 2009 to 2013. The messages published by Wiki-leaks contain an unambiguous statement by her campaign chairman, John Podesta. Quote, "We need to use our diplomatic and more traditional intelligence assets to bring pressure on the governments of Qatar and Saudi Arabia, which are providing clandestine financial and logistic support to ISIL and other radical Sunni groups in the region." This wasn't the first time U.S. officials had made this claim. In 2009, WikiLeaks published diplomatic cables from the U.S. State Department, which spelled out the same concerns. Donors in Saudi Arabia constitute the most significant source of funding to Sunni terrorist groups worldwide, the document said. While the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia takes seriously the threat of terrorism within Saudi Arabia, it has been an ongoing challenge to persuade Saudi officials to treat terrorist financing emanating from Saudi Arabia as a strategic priority. More needs to be done since Saudi Arabia remains a critical financial support base for Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, LET. I'm not sure what that stands for, LET. It looks familiar, and yet I'm not sure. And other terrorist groups. If somebody knows, if you could stick it in the comments below, it would help us all. Including Hamas, which probably raise millions of dollars annually from Saudi sources. A third WikiLeaks file appeared to show a private speech that Hillary Clinton made in 2013. In it, she said, "The Saudis and others are shipping large amounts of weapons and pretty indiscriminately, not at all targeted toward the people we think would be the more moderate, least likely to cause problems in the future." While the WikiLeaks files are widely regarded to be genuine, fact check cannot verify the accuracy of the claims within them. However, given the repetition of similar statements, it certainly seems that people in the highest ranks of U.S. government have had good reason to believe money is flowing between Saudi Arabia and ISIS. Indeed, the former U.S. Vice President Joe Biden once spoke off-message by accusing Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states of pouring hundreds of millions hundreds of millions of dollars and tens of tons of weapons into anyone who would fight against Assad. He explained the people who were being supplied were al-Nusra and al-Qaeda and the extremist elements of jihadis who were coming from other parts of the world. We declared ISIS a terrorist group early on, and we could not convince our colleagues to stop supplying them. In other countries, politicians have been more vocal about these concerns. For instance, in 2014, the Iraqi Prime Minister, Nouri al-Maliki, accused both Saudi Arabia and Qatar of supporting and funding terrorists. I accuse them of inciting and encouraging the terrorist movements, he said. I accuse them of supporting them politically and in the media of supporting them with money and by buying weapons for them. However, just because the Saudi government is not doing enough to stop the flow of money to ISIS, that doesn't necessarily mean the cash is coming direct from the government itself. Well, it was. We've already examined and come to that conclusion. In fact, research by the Washington Institute said that there was no credible evidence of this at the moment. This is probably because Saudi Arabia is fearful of the threat ISIS may pose to their own country, it said. But the report added that Saudi government has taken pleasure in recent ISIS-led Sunni advances against Iraq's Shiite government and in jihadist gains in Syria at Bashar al-Assad's expense. It added it would not be surprising to learn of limited, perhaps indirect contact, logistical coordination to further Sunni positions in Syria and beyond, or leaking of funds and material from Saudi-supported rebels to ISIS. We know that, the former prince was supplying ISIS. So I don't know how necessary it is. Okay. Government documents show that British arms companies have been granted 636 military export licenses for Saudi Arabia in the last 5 years. These were worth about £5.2 billion in total. Meanwhile, America has just signed a $110 billion arms deal with the country, including planes, ships, and bombs. There's also a balancing act in terms of security and intelligence. Supporters of Western policy say that, despite these concerns, the state is an increasingly rare and important ally in the Middle East. Theresa May has said a good relationship is in British national interest, but although the political and diplomatic solution may be far from clear, it seems that the concerns over Saudi money being channeled to ISIS are real and serious. And of course, we know that. So I don't see any real need in continuing here. I think we pretty much know all this. So let's go back. Was Hillary Rodham Clinton connected? Well, of course, and we know that because remember that Saudi Arabia, donated so much to the Clinton Foundation, and they were getting something in exchange. And of course, it was weapons. What else would it be? Why is this relevant? Well, of course it's relevant. Why is controlling the narrative important? Well, whoever controls the narrative controls what people believe in the story, because most people accept what they're told. Most people accept whatever's on the news. They don't think beyond that. If they say something happened on the news and it is a certain way and they slant it a certain way, most people will take that and run with it. I've observed that. I'm sure you've all observed that as well. Why is controlling the narrative important? Well, they don't want people to arrive at the truth. They want people to arrive at their truth, the truth as they see it, not to be able to make up our minds, not to give us the whole story unbiased and let us make up our own minds. That's not what the news does. Do most people investigate for themselves or simply follow? Well, we know that the answer to that. Most people will simply follow whatever they hear on the mainstream media because they don't have the wherewithal to be able to dissect it and to look into it themselves. A lot of people don't. Or they, really people are just slaving and trying to make a living, and they come home and they're tired and they sit down and they put their feet up. Maybe for the first time that day, they grab a newspaper, they grab a coffee, whatever, and they listen to the news. And already they're absolutely exhausted from their day. They've probably had errands. They've had all sorts of issues at work. They might have had to pick up kids, whatever. And when they get a minute to relax in front of the news, they're not in that place of, well, I'm going to pick apart everything I see here. They're in that place of, gosh, I'm absolutely exhausted. I'm going to watch the news, grab something to eat, and head for bed. So I do understand most people right now are just trapped in the rat race of life. And it's so busy that they hear little bits and pieces, and that's what they go with because they don't have the energy left over to be able to dissect it. And I do understand that. It's not that everyone is stupid. It's that, they've wrapped us up in all this stuff that we have to do just to live. It's getting ridiculous. But anyway, I'll go on and not ride my hobby horses. So they simply follow whatever they hear on mainstream media. Why is the mainstream media so hostile towards POTUS? Well, because the mainstream media is notoriously left. So, of course, they're going to be hostile towards POTUS. And also, the mainstream media is full of the CIA. So, of course, they're going to be hostile. Their little kingdom's being taken away from them, or is being threatened, at least. So, and, when you look into who owns the media, you understand why the message is what it is. Why each and every day is the mainstream media pushing a particular topic? Because they're trying to push race wars. They're trying to make it seem like this country is more divided than they really are. And that's the way I see it. I do think that there is some division there, but it's not as divided as some would have us believe. So, and then Q is asking, coordinated? Like, is this coordinated? Well, of course it's coordinated. Who sets the narrative for the day? Well, I don't exactly know who sets the narrative for the day. Somebody does. I'm not sure. How is the narrative communicated to the mainstream media? I'm not sure. I believe that they have agents in place there. We've known that for a very long time, and I think it's probably communicated from someone in the upper echelon of government to those, agents to be disseminated. I don't know. I don't know how it works. And me claiming that I do know would be just a lie. So I do know that there are CIA agents embedded in the media, and I think we've all believed that to be true. How is the narrative? Okay, we don't really know, unless some of you do. If you do, please, by all means, put it in the comments. I'm not here saying that I have all the answers to everything, because I don't, and there's a lot of people that listen to this that have been exposed to maybe different things than I have, so I really appreciate that, and I know that the people that read the comments appreciate it too. So, what does the NSA / military intelligence have, at least what you know of, that allows for data collection? Well, I've got this little thing on the NSA data collection, and let me take you out there. Okay, how the NSA is tracking people right now. Documents obtained by the Washington Post indicate that the National Security Agency is collecting billions of records a day to track the location of mobile phone users around the world. This bulk collection, performed under the NSA's International Surveillance Authority, taps into the telephone links of major telecommunications providers including some here in the United States. The NSA collects this location and travel habit data to do target development, to find unknown associates of target it already knows about. To accomplish this, the NSA compiles information on a vast database of devices and their locations. Most of those collected, by definition, are suspected of no wrongdoing. Officials say that they do not purposely collect U.S. phone locations in bulk, but a large number are swept up, quote, incidentally. Yeah. Using these vast location databases, the NSA applies sophisticated analytics techniques to identify what it calls co-travelers, unknown associates who might be traveling with or meeting up with a known target. So that's just a little bit, but this is actually very interesting because it says cell tower coverage leaves few places to hide. Just by virtue of being on a mobile device reveals its location in multiple ways on the basic signaling pathways of the global telephone network. Much of that data cross U.S. territory, even for foreign registered phones. NSA collection from those links is known as upstream. Now, how the NSA gets locations from mobile devices, and this is just one method that they're collecting. There's a lot of things, and there's probably methods that we're not even aware of. But when mobile devices connect to a cellular network, they announce their presence on one or more registers maintained by telephone providers in order to connect and bill their counterparts for telephone calls. Registration messages often include a device's course location at the level of a city or country, or a finer position based on distance from a cellular tower. Many mobile devices and smartphones use Wi-Fi signals as well to fix their locations, relying on databases that map millions of hotspots around the world. These signals can locate a device down to a city block. GPS receivers built into many cellular and satellite telephones can locate a device within 100 meters radius or less. Most mobile operators also track phones precisely by triangulating their distance from multiple towers, for example, to provide location-based emergency services. Okay, now, and it's saying right here, this little map right here, it's saying this map depicts North American cell towers for illustration. The NSA says it does not intentionally collect U.S. location data in bulk, but it incidentally takes in a great deal. Right. Okay. How the NSA tracks targets to find possible associates. Now, before I say that too, I think we've all been watching the news, and there's a somebody's accused of murder, and they say, well, their cell phone was pinged from such a location at such a time, so they either, could have done the murder or could not have, based on that. And so I think that they're using this more and more, and the fact that we're hearing that all the time, they look at missing persons, cell phone data, and so forth, tells me that information is readily available to them. How the NSA tracks targets to find possible associates. Co-traveler analytics is one active operational NSA target development method. It draws on location data such as global cell phone tower identification to compute the data, time, and location of any device in proximity to a known foreign intelligence target within a 1-hour time window. This system monitors individuals' movements regardless of whether they had previously been identified as a target. So you could be targeted just because you are, you happen to be in the vicinity of a foreign intelligence target. It's interesting. Is that legal? The NSA says its collection is lawful. The agency says it is not interested in everyone's data and does not intentionally collect U.S. information in bulk, location information in bulk. I'm not sure if I believe that because, like I said, it seems like every missing person, they always say, well, their cell phone was pinged from such and such a location and then nothing after that. Why is it that all these missing people or, people that are accused of murder or whatever, how is it that they're getting all this data if they're not collecting it? I don't know. Following targets. More significant is the program's ability to search huge volumes of time-stamped position records without specifying a target, looking for unexpected droplets of useful information in a sea of data. For the overwhelming majority of phone users swept into the system, the NSA has no reason to suspect that their movements are relevant to a valid foreign intelligence purpose. So, and from what I've understood is that when they say, you know, chatter has increased or whatever, they are able to, there's code words that they look for in all the telephone communication and email communication and whatever, and it triggers based on those words. Exactly how it works, I'm not sure, but I think it's probably a lot more sophisticated than we think it is. That would be my understanding, because generally by the time something hits the public, they're way, way, way ahead of that. So this is interesting. I think it's interesting to know. Of course, we already know that we're being watched and listened to and observed. I don't particularly like it, not because I'm doing anything wrong, but I don't feel that I need to be babysat and watched. I just don't like the idea, but it is what it is. Okay, and then Q says, think Snowden. And of course, Snowden was the one that discovered all that they had these machines, but actually they were collecting U.S. data as well by doing this. I'd like to watch that movie, Snowden. I really think that it would help me to understand this a little more deeply. So I should look for that and try and watch it. Why is the NSA limited regarding ability to capture and unmask U.S. persons? I don't know. I'm not exactly sure. I think because it's supposed to be illegal to be spying on U.S. citizens, but of course we know that it happens. If anyone has an answer to this, I'd be really, really curious to know, because they're saying that their target is not U.S. citizens, but U.S. citizens become sort of, you know, in that. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but some of you may. And who sets the narrative? I don't know. And then Q asks, U.S. persons? Well, I don't know. I would assume that it's U.S. persons, but maybe not. With everything that we've learned about all these foreign, this foreign influence on our government, I don't know if it's U.S. persons or not. Who can violate this rule? I don't know. Who cannot violate this rule? I don't know the answer to that either. I'm not sure. I would say that the NSA could violate the rule, but I'm not 100% sure of that. So why is Admiral, and this is Admiral, Michael S. Rogers. So Admiral Rogers, why is Admiral Rogers so important? Well, if you recall, he was the only person that was not replaced by Trump, and he was part of the Obama administration, but he's obviously loyal to Trump. And it's interesting because the Obama administration wanted to fire him, and the reason given was poor performance. But there was something else going on there, because remember, he met with Trump before Trump got in, and he was actually, I think, going to be replaced, but then after he met with Trump, you know, privately, Trump kept him in his position. So I'm not exactly sure what went on there, but it's interesting. Okay, and who wanted him fired? Okay, I'm going to read this to you because I think it's really interesting. I didn't know this. The Washington Post reported on the 19th of November 2016 that Defense Secretary Ashton B. Carter and Director of National Intelligence James R. Clapper Jr. had recommended to President Obama that Rogers be terminated as Director of the National Security Agency. Carter reportedly recommended he be terminated due to poor performance, whereas Clapper considered it wise that the position be held by a civilian. Both Clapper and Carter had put Rogers on notice for poor performance in internal security and for poor leadership style. His termination was reportedly delayed due to stalled changes in the bureaucratic structure of the intelligence community. Later, Rogers reportedly met with then President-elect Donald Trump without notifying his superiors in what is an unprecedented action for a military officer. Trump was reportedly considering replacing Clapper with Rogers as DNI, Director of National Intelligence. However, that position went to former Senator Dan Coats, with Rogers remaining NSA Director. So it's interesting, isn't it? It would be nice to know everything that's gone on behind the scenes, and I think that Q is trying to at least fill us in on what we can be filled in on. So who has the ultimate power to, okay, first of all, why wasn't Admiral Michael Rogers replaced by POTUS when taking office? Well, obviously, Trump trusted him. I don't think he would keep him in if he didn't trust him. So why is this relevant? Well, because everyone else was replaced except Admiral Rogers. So that is significant. Who has the ultimate power to designate classification? And I think that's the head of the NSA, I believe. Who ultimately sets classification? I believe it's the NSA. I could be completely wrong. Why is this relevant? I'm not exactly sure, but it could be very relevant. Fantasyland, Q. So I'm going to leave it there for tonight because the next one is quite long, and I think we'll be a while with that one. So, but actually, let me see if there's any little short ones in between. We'll get those out of the way. And there is. So, Oh, okay, no, it's going to take a while to go through the next stuff. So I'm going to sign off for tonight. I may do another one tonight, actually. We'll see how it goes. But anyway, thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks so much.